Nobody wanted the gifted Apache girl until the lone cowboy chose her as his wife. The desert wind moved like a living thing across the wide lands of the Southwest. It carried dust, heat, and sometimes the smell of rain long before clouds appeared. In that land, under a sky that seemed too big for one person to claim, a girl named Ayanna learned very early that belonging was not something everyone received. She was born during a time of great change. Her people, the Apache, had once traveled freely across mountains and dry valleys. They knew every canyon, every hidden spring, every place where wild horses gathered at dawn. But by the time Ayanna was old enough to walk, her world had already grown smaller. Her family now lived on land chosen by others, land that felt crowded and tired. Food was harder to find. Water did not always come when it should. Many of the elders carried sadness in their eyes. They spoke softly about the old days, about wide journeys and strong camps. Ayanna did not remember those days, but she listened carefully to every story. From the beginning, she was quiet. Not shy, just observant. While other children laughed and chased each other through the dust, she would sit near the edge of the camp and watch the hills. She noticed things most people missed. She could tell when a rabbit had passed by hours earlier. She could look at the sky and know if the wind would change before nightfall. Her mother used to smile at her and say, "You see more than others." Her father would nod and add, "And you speak only when needed. That is strength." For a short while, her life felt warm and safe. In the evenings, her family gathered near the fire. Her mother braided her long dark hair and told her stories of strong women who carried wisdom like a hidden flame. Her father showed her how to follow tracks in the sand without leaving heavy footprints of her own. But sickness came to the camp one summer. It moved quietly from family to family. No one understood it fully. Some recovered, some did not. Ayanna lost both her parents within a single season. She was only 10 years old when she stood beside a fresh mound of earth, feeling the world become larger and colder at the same time. After that, she moved between relatives. An aunt took her in first, but the aunt already had many children and little food. The rations given to families were never enough. Ayanna tried to make herself small. She ate less, she spoke less. She worked harder than anyone asked her to. She woke before sunrise to gather water. She helped mend clothing. She watched younger children so the older ones could search for work or trade. Still, she could feel it. She was not fully theirs. People did not treat her badly. They simply treated her like something temporary. Some evenings she would hear whispers. "She's different. She stares too much. She knows things she shouldn't." The elders did not say these words with fear, but with uncertainty. In difficult times, anything unusual felt heavy. When food is scarce and the future unclear, people often hold tighter to what feels familiar. Ayanna's gift did not look like much to outsiders. She did not claim to see visions. She did not speak in riddles. She simply understood patterns. Once, when a group of boys chased a young horse near the edge of the camp, the animal grew wild with panic. It kicked and ran in circles, nearly knocking one boy to the ground. The adults shouted from a distance, but did not dare approach. Ayanna walked forward slowly. She did not run. She did not wave her arms. She simply stepped into the horse's path and lowered her eyes slightly. She breathed slowly, steady as the wind. The horse stopped. Its sides heaved with fear, but it stopped. She reached out her hand, and after a long moment the horse lowered its head. The adults stared in silence. No one praised her. No one scolded her. They simply looked at her differently after that. As the years passed, that look followed her everywhere. By the time she was 12, she could predict rain more accurately than some elders. She knew which plants would survive dry weeks and which would wither first. She could walk miles without complaint. She rarely asked for anything. Yet when families discussed future marriages or partnerships, her name was never mentioned. Other girls her age were already being noticed. Some laughed loudly, showing confidence. Some came from families with strong ties and protection. Some brought livestock or useful connections. Ayana brought skill and silence. In easier times, those qualities might have been admired openly. But these were not easy times. The reservation life was tight and uncertain. Many young men felt pressure to prove themselves strong providers. They wanted wives who came with family networks, with visible security. Ayana had no parents, no strong backing, no promise of extra resources. She had only herself. One afternoon, while walking beyond the camp's usual path, she noticed something unusual. The air felt wrong. The wind moved in short bursts instead of long, steady streams. Birds had gone quiet earlier than usual. She looked toward the hills and felt a heaviness in her chest. She returned quickly and told her aunt, "The storm will come tonight, stronger than it looks." The sky was still mostly clear. Only thin clouds drifted far above. Her aunt hesitated but trusted her enough to tie down loose cloth and secure the small shelter walls. A few others followed her example. That night, a sudden storm swept through the area. Strong winds tore through unprepared camps. Loose materials flew. Several small structures were damaged. Her aunt's shelter remained standing. The next morning, some people thanked her quietly. Others simply nodded. Still, gratitude did not change her position. She was useful, but she was not chosen. As she entered her 14th year, something shifted inside her. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something steadier. Acceptance. She stopped waiting for someone to claim her as their responsibility. Instead, she claimed responsibility for herself. She began rising even earlier than before. She walked farther from camp to study animal paths. She paid attention to how the land changed after every season. She practiced calming restless horses, learning how tone and posture mattered more than force. Sometimes she would sit on a flat rock overlooking the valley and simply watch the horizon. She felt connected to the land in a way she could not explain. It did not reject her. It did not whisper doubts. It simply existed, steady and patient. People often misunderstand quiet strength. They mistake it for weakness. They assume silence means emptiness. But inside Ayana, there was a growing foundation. She knew hunger. She knew loss. She knew what it felt like to stand beside people and still feel alone. Yet she did not grow bitter. One evening, while helping an elder woman gather firewood, the woman studied her carefully and said, "You carry yourself like someone much older." Ayana gave a small smile. "I had to grow fast." Do not shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Those words stayed with her. Still, daily life did not change much. Suitors did not come. Families did not compete for her attention. She remained the girl who worked quietly at the edge of gatherings, but something else was happening that no one noticed. Beyond the reservation boundary, beyond the worn trails and guarded looks, the wider world was shifting too. New ranches were forming. Cowboys moved cattle across open lands. Some were kind. Some were harsh. Most were simply trying to survive in their own way. Ayana did not know yet that her path would one day cross with someone who also understood loneliness. For now, she remained the girl no one fully claimed. On certain nights when the moon was bright and the camp had fallen silent, she would step outside and look up at the sky. The stars stretched endlessly above her, scattered like quiet promises. She did not pray for rescue. She did not wish for wealth. She only hoped that one day someone would see her clearly, not as a burden, not as a mystery, not as something strange, just as Ayana. Until that day came, she kept learning. She kept observing. She kept becoming stronger in ways that did not need applause. And though many believed she stood alone in the world, the land itself seemed to stand with her, waiting, patient, knowing that her story had not yet truly begun. The days were long and hot in the desert. Ayana had grown accustomed to waking before the sun and walking across the dry land. She moved quietly, as if her feet knew secrets that the wind carried. Life on the reservation was still difficult, but she had learned to find beauty in small moments, the way sunlight reflected on the stones, the smell of sage after a rain, the quiet of the night when the stars filled the sky. One autumn morning, she noticed something different while walking near the edge of the land. A horse was running wildly, kicking up dust in a frenzy. Its eyes were wide with fear, and it galloped without a rider. Ayanna froze for a moment, then slowly approached. She did not shout. She did not wave her arms. She simply stood in the path of the horse, her hand outstretched, her voice calm. The horse slowed and then stopped, leaning toward her, as if it trusted her instinctively. Ayanna breathed slowly, guiding the animal with soft words and gentle gestures. A man appeared on the horizon, riding quickly, calling to the horse, but it did not move until Ayanna stepped aside. The man watched from a distance, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. He was tall and strong, wearing a hat that shadowed his face. He was older than most boys who had been interested in girls from the reservation, but there was a look in his eyes that suggested he had seen much in his life: hardships, loss, and long days alone. The man returned the horse and rode off, but curiosity lingered in his gaze. He came back the next day, and then the day after, always under the pretense of business, selling supplies, buying small items, but always observing Ayanna. He watched the way she handled animals, the way she moved across the land, and the calm in her voice. His name was Thomas Callahan, a cowboy who lived several miles beyond the reservation. He was a loner by choice, carrying a quiet sadness with him. He had lost his wife years before to illness, and his brother to war. He had learned to live with solitude, trusting only himself and the land. But something about Ayanna made him pause. Her strength was quiet, but undeniable. For Ayanna, Thomas was a curiosity. She had seen many outsiders pass by, most ignoring her, some mocking her, some trying to take advantage of the land or the animals. But Thomas was different. He did not rush toward her, did not demand attention. He observed. He waited. He returned again and again, slowly building trust without forcing it. She noticed small things about him: how he treated his horse with care, how he spoke to other people with respect, how he seemed more comfortable listening than talking. In a world where many men seemed rough and loud, he was quiet and steady. She had learned to recognize true steadiness over loud promises, and Thomas had it in abundance. The reservation children whispered about him. "He comes back every day," some said. Why would a man care about her? Others were curious but cautious, knowing that Ayanna was not a girl anyone could easily understand. Even the elders noticed his visits but said little. Some approved, some disapproved, but none could deny that there was a connection forming, invisible, yet undeniable. Thomas spoke little at first, and when he did, his words were practical. He asked about horses, about which plants would survive the coming winter, about small things only someone truly observant would notice. Ayanna answered calmly, measuring her words. She had learned that words given too freely often led to disappointment, but those measured in true could build bridges. Over time, he began to ask for her opinion more often. "Do you think this path is safe for the cattle?" he asked one day, pointing to a trail along the hills. Ayanna examined the ground, noticing faint marks of recent rains that would make the trail slippery. "It will be dangerous after the next storm," she said. "Better to wait a day and let the land settle." He nodded, impressed not just by her knowledge but by her confidence. "I wouldn't have noticed that," he admitted. "You see the world differently." They began spending more time together, though neither used the word friendship. There was no rush, no expectation, only quiet understanding. Thomas learned that Ayanna could calm any animal, guide any horse, and predict storms with accuracy that even experienced men envied. She taught him things about the land that he had never noticed, even after years of working it. Ayanna, in turn, noticed that Thomas carried a gentleness beneath his rugged exterior. He treated others with patience, did not raise his voice without reason, and worked harder than most men she had seen. Unlike others, he did not expect her to change or shrink herself, to make his life easier. He simply accepted her as she was. Rumors began to spread through the town and the reservation. People questioned his interest. "Why would a man like him choose her?" they whispered. "She has no family, no connections. She is strange. She is quiet. Surely he will leave her." Thomas ignored the gossip. He had lived long enough to understand that people often judged without knowledge. He did not care about approval or tradition. What mattered was what he had learned to see: the value of strength, intelligence, and calm. The value of someone who understood the land as he did, someone who could be a true partner. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Thomas and Ayanna walked together to check the fences along the edge of the land. They worked silently, their movements synchronized, each understanding the other's rhythm. When a hawk swooped low over the valley, they stopped and watched, neither speaking until the bird disappeared into the distance. "That hawk will find food tonight," Ayanna said quietly. "The rabbits are hiding, but it will succeed." Thomas smiled, a rare and small gesture. "You see everything," he said. "Sometimes I think you understand this land better than anyone."
Ayanna looked at him but said nothing. She had learned that recognition from others was fleeting, but recognition from someone who truly understood her was powerful.
Over the following months, their bond deepened. They faced small challenges together: a fence that collapsed, cattle that wandered, a sudden storm, but always emerged with respect for each other's skill. Thomas began to trust her judgment in ways he had not trusted anyone in years. He began to rely on her not just for practical matters, but for insight, for guidance, for quiet strength. Ayanna, in turn, began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known. For the first time in her life, she was not just surviving. She was seen. She was chosen. Not for convenience, not for social expectation, not because she was easy to manage, but because of who she was and what she offered to the world around her. One afternoon, while trading supplies in the nearby town, Thomas overheard people talking about Ayanna. "She's strange," one man said. "Too quiet, too different. I wouldn't want her for my family." Thomas did not respond, but inside he felt a quiet pride. He had already made his choice. He did not need the approval of others. Ayanna was capable, strong, and wise. She was more than they could understand, and that was exactly why he wanted her in his life. Meanwhile, Ayanna continued her own preparation. She knew that life beyond the reservation would be different. She had learned the ways of her people, the ways of tracking, healing, predicting the land. But she also knew that to thrive with Thomas, she would need to balance two worlds. She would need patience, courage, and resilience. At night, when the wind whispered through the hills, she thought about the man who chose her, who came to see her not as an object or a burden, but as a partner. For the first time, she imagined a life that could belong to her, a life where her gift was recognized not as strange, but as valuable. One winter evening, as snow began to dust the desert, Thomas approached her camp. The fire was low, casting shadows across her face. He handed her a small bundle of supplies: flour, dried meat, and a warm blanket. "For the coming cold," he said simply. Ayanna accepted it without hesitation, noting the care with which he had gathered it. "Thank you," she said. "This will help." Thomas paused, then added, "You don't have to do everything alone. You never have to." Those words, simple and honest, stayed with her. She realized that he was offering more than supplies. He was offering partnership, trust, and a place in a world that had often ignored her. The bond between them grew steadily. It was quiet, strong, and respectful, like the land they both loved. And while the town and reservation continued to whisper in doubt, neither Thomas nor Ayanna allowed it to sway them. They had found something that mattered more than opinion: understanding, skill, and a shared respect that could withstand even the harshest seasons. By the time the spring sun returned to warm the valley, their lives were intertwined in ways neither had anticipated. They worked together, learned from each other, and prepared for challenges that would come. Ayanna's confidence grew, and Thomas's respect deepened. Both began to sense that the life ahead was not just about survival. It could be something more, something full of trust, skill, and shared purpose. Though neither of them spoke of love in the way the world expected, it was there, silent, steady, and enduring. It did not rush or demand. It simply existed, like the wind over the desert, guiding them, protecting them, and preparing them for a future that neither could fully see but both knew was coming. The winter had been harsh that year. Snow fell early and stayed late, covering the hills and valleys in white. The reservation and nearby towns struggled with the cold. Livestock froze, water froze, and food became scarce. Yet, Ayanna and Thomas moved through the storm as if the land itself guided them. They had grown used to relying on each other, trusting each other, and reading the world together. It was in this winter that Thomas finally spoke of a future they had both begun to sense but had not yet named. They sat by the fire one evening, the wind howling outside their small shelter. Thomas had built most of the cabin himself, and Ayanna had helped with every careful detail, using her knowledge of the land to ensure it would survive floods, snow, and storms. "I don't know if anyone else will ever understand you," Thomas said quietly, watching the flames dance. "But I do. I see you.
All of you.
The strength, the quiet, the way you care for this land and everything on it. I want you with me. Not just for a day or a season. I want you with me, always." Ayanna looked at him, her eyes steady, her hands folded in her lap. She felt a mix of emotion, but none of it rushed her. "I have learned to live alone," she said softly. "I know how to survive without anyone's help. But I also know that life is easier and stronger with someone you trust." Thomas nodded. "Then trust me. I choose you, not because you are easy, not because anyone else approves, but because you are you. I want to make a life together, here, on this land, with everything we have." The words were simple, but heavy with meaning. Ayanna had never been chosen before, not in her family, not in her tribe, not even by the men who sometimes looked at her with fleeting interest. But Thomas was not choosing her out of necessity, obligation, or convenience. He was choosing her because he recognized her strength and her gift. In the weeks that followed, they quietly prepared for marriage. There were no big celebrations, no townspeople invited, just the two of them, a traveling preacher who passed through occasionally, and a few witnesses who had been quietly observing their connection. When the day came, it was cold and bright, with the sun reflecting off the snow. Thomas took Ayanna's hand, steady and calm, and spoke words that felt like a promise rather than a ritual. She answered, her voice firm and clear, speaking from the place in her heart that had learned resilience, patience, and trust. The ceremony was short, but it changed everything. For the first time, Ayanna felt a sense of permanence. She belonged, not to the reservation, not to the town, not to anyone but herself. But she also belonged to someone who understood her, someone who valued her gifts and her knowledge. After their marriage, life did not become easy. The town and some members of the reservation were skeptical. Some women whispered as she passed. Some men made remarks about how she had no family or connections. Shopkeepers raised their prices when Thomas came to trade. Some neighboring ranchers refused to sell supplies, seeing their partnership as unusual. But Thomas and Ayanna ignored the judgment. They focused on the work at hand. They repaired fences, guided cattle, and planted small gardens where the soil allowed. They shared responsibilities, each contributing in ways that complemented the other. Thomas brought experience, muscle, and strategy. Ayanna brought insight, foresight, and calm intuition. It was remarkable to see. Even in the cold and hardship, their ranch began to thrive. Horses that had been sick recovered under Ayanna's care. The crops that others expected to fail survived because she understood which seeds to plant and where. The animals responded to her presence, calm and willing, as if they recognized her as part of the land itself. Word began to spread quietly. People who had doubted her skill saw the results of her labor. When a severe blizzard threatened the cattle of neighboring ranchers, it was Ayanna who warned Thomas and guided the herd to safe shelter. Their neighbors watched in awe as the couple moved with the animals through snow and wind, their calm confidence saving lives. Some who had once mocked them came seeking advice. "How did you know to do that?" they asked, shivering and frustrated. Ayanna spoke plainly. "I watch. I listen. I notice the small signs the land gives. That is all." Even as respect grew, challenges persisted. There were nights when the cold was unbearable, when supplies ran low, when sickness touched their small home. Yet each difficulty only strengthened their bond. Thomas learned to trust her judgment without hesitation. Ayanna learned that his steadiness could anchor her when she doubted herself. The town slowly changed its attitude, though not entirely. Some people still whispered. Some still doubted. But the results of their work could not be ignored. The cattle were healthier, the horses calmer, the land more productive. Their quiet competence demanded recognition, even from those who preferred to resist it. For Ayanna, the change was not just external. She had grown into a woman who no longer measured her worth by the judgment of others. She had found a life where her knowledge and skill mattered. She had found a partner who respected her for exactly who she was. And she had learned that true acceptance could not be forced. It had to be earned through persistence, patience, and consistency. Thomas often reflected on the irony of it all. He had been alone for years, trusting only himself and the land. Now he realized that having someone like Ayanna by his side was not a loss of independence, but a gain in strength. Together they could withstand challenges that neither could face alone. One spring morning after a long, cold winter, Thomas and Ayanna walked along the hills to inspect their land. The snow had melted, and the ground was soft and wet. Streams of water flowed from the hills, nourishing the soil. Birds returned, and the valley felt alive again. Ayanna paused and bent to examine a patch of wildflowers. "The land is ready for planting," she said. "It will grow if we take care of it." Thomas watched her, admiration in his eyes. "You see what no one else notices," he said, "and you act on it. That is why we thrive. That is why this land feels like ours now." She smiled, a small, quiet smile, and they continued their walk together. Each step was deliberate, each movement in harmony. The animals followed them, calm and trusting, as if sensing the strength of their partnership. As the seasons changed, their life together became a rhythm of work and understanding. They shared meals, stories, and silent moments. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and ways of thinking. Thomas grew to appreciate not only Ayanna's skill but also her wisdom and perspective. She could see dangers and opportunities that he could not, and she guided him with care and confidence. Ayanna, in turn, learned to trust Thomas's judgment and strength. She saw in him a man who was steady, honest, and willing to support her fully. Their partnership was rare, equal, respectful, and built on trust rather than expectation or tradition. Even the children in the nearby area began to notice. They watched her handle animals, tend the land, and speak with quiet authority. Some began to follow her example, learning patience, observation, and respect for nature. Ayanna did not teach through lectures but through action, showing them what was possible when knowledge met care. And through it all, the town's opinion mattered less and less. Those who had doubted or whispered began to see the results. The couple's work was undeniable. It was quiet, patient, and strong. Their home and land thrived because they acted together, each respecting the other's gifts. By the end of that first year of marriage, Ayanna had transformed from the girl no one wanted to the woman everyone quietly relied upon. She did not seek recognition, but it came anyway. The same people who had once doubted her sought her guidance, and she offered it freely, with calm confidence. Thomas often reflected on their journey. He had chosen her when others would not. He had seen her quietly, deeply, and understood her gifts. And in return, she had chosen to trust him, to build a life with him, and to create a partnership that could withstand storms, cold, and skepticism. Through the winter and into the spring, it became clear that their partnership was more than survival. It was life itself, steady, enduring, and meaningful. They had proven that respect, trust, and recognition were stronger than doubt, gossip, or fear. And as they worked together on the land, side by side, they built something lasting, a home, a future, and a story of quiet strength that no one could ignore. Years passed on the desert land and life settled into a steady rhythm for Ayanna and Thomas. The seasons came and went with quiet predictability. Harsh winters, hot summers, sudden storms, and gentle springs. Each year tested their strength, patience, and resilience, and each year they met those challenges together side by side, never rushing, never faltering. Ayana had grown into a woman of quiet authority and wisdom. She no longer felt the sting of being overlooked or ignored. Her skill with animals, her understanding of the land, and her patience with both people and nature had become well known. Children from both the reservation and nearby towns would come to watch her work, learning to observe, to care, and to respect the land. She taught them how to track animals, understand the weather, and notice the smallest signs of change in nature. The people who had once whispered and doubted her slowly came to see her value. Shopkeepers offered fair trades, neighbors asked for advice, and even families who had refused to acknowledge her before came seeking her guidance. But Ayana never changed herself to fit their expectations. She remained calm, steady, and true to who she was, quietly letting her actions speak louder than words ever could. Thomas, meanwhile, continued to work alongside her. He had once thought of himself as a lone man, too tired and weary of the world to trust anyone fully. But life with Ayana had taught him a different lesson. Trust did not weaken him. It strengthened him. Her insight, her careful thought, and her courage complemented his own experience and strength. Together they had built a life that could withstand storms, both literal and metaphorical. One summer evening, after a long day tending to the herd, Thomas and Ayana sat outside their cabin, watching the sun dip below the hills. The sky was painted in oranges and purples, the wind soft against their skin. The animals grazed quietly nearby, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly still. Thomas turned to Ayana and said, "Do you remember when I first saw you with that wild horse?" Ayana smiled faintly, her eyes following a rabbit darting through the grass. "I remember. You didn't look scared, though, just curious." "I was curious," he admitted. "But I had no idea what that curiosity would lead to. I didn't know I would end up here, with you, building a life like this." She looked at him then, her expression calm but warm. "Life is full of surprises," she said. "But the ones worth holding on to are the ones we choose, not the ones chosen for us." And that was true of them both. They had chosen each other, quietly and without fanfare, and that choice had shaped every moment since. As the years continued, their home became more than just a shelter. It became a place of learning, care, and community. Ayana's knowledge spread beyond their small land. People came seeking advice on weather patterns, animal care, and how to survive the harsh environment. She shared her wisdom freely, never asking for anything in return, only hoping that her guidance would help others thrive as she had learned to do. Thomas watched her, often in silence, admiring the way she moved through the world. She carried herself with confidence but never arrogance. She commanded respect not through force but through skill and patience. He realized that the girl no one wanted had grown into a woman everyone relied upon, yet she had remained herself through it all. Their life was not without hardship. There were still harsh winters, years when crops failed, and times when illness struck. Yet each challenge was met with the steady rhythm they had built together. They relied on one another, trusting in the skills and wisdom they both brought to the land. And through those trials, their bond grew even stronger. Children who had once watched from a distance now ran freely across their land, learning from both Ayana and Thomas. They taught them patience, respect for animals, and careful observation of the natural world. Families who had doubted them now came to ask for guidance, and the couple shared what they knew with quiet generosity. Ayana had come to understand something profound. Being gifted or different was not always about recognition in the moment. Sometimes it was about patience, persistence, and waiting for the right people to see your worth. She had spent years feeling unseen, undervalued, and overlooked. But through it all, she had remained true to herself, and now her gifts were not just acknowledged, they were needed. Thomas, too, had learned a lesson. He had thought he could survive alone, that trust and partnership were luxuries he could not afford. But life with Ayana had shown him that partnership did not diminish independence, it enhanced it. Together, They had created something stronger than either could have built alone. Time moved steadily on, and the couple grew older. Their hair grayed, and their hands bore the marks of years spent working the land. Yet their bond remained as strong as ever. They had faced storms, skeptics, and the harsh realities of life, and they had emerged not only unbroken but enriched by the experience. When Ayana passed many years later, the town and reservation alike felt the loss. People who had once doubted her attended her funeral. They spoke quietly of the woman who had seen what others could not, who had guided them through storms, who had saved animals, land, and livelihoods with her knowledge and wisdom. They spoke of the girl who no one wanted and how she had become someone everyone respected. Thomas stood by her side until the very end. He had never stopped choosing her, never stopped admiring her, never stopped relying on the steady strength she had brought into his life. He continued to live on their land, preserving the lessons and wisdom she had shared, teaching those who came after them how to read the land, care for animals, and live with patience and respect.
Ayana's legacy was not written in wealth or fame.
It was written in the animals she had saved, the land she had nurtured, and the people she had taught. Her life was a quiet testament to resilience, patience, and the power of being true to oneself. And in that quiet desert, where wind carried stories across hills and valleys, her story lived on. The girl no one wanted had grown into a woman everyone admired. She had built a life of meaning, guided by skill, patience, and a steady heart. And through it all, the lone cowboy who had chosen her stood beside her, a reminder that sometimes the right choice can change everything. In the end, their story was simple but profound, a life built on trust, respect, and quiet strength. Ayana had learned that being different was a gift, not a curse. Thomas had learned that true partnership could heal even the deepest wounds. Together they had shown that patience, understanding, and courage could overcome hardship, skepticism, and loneliness. And that lesson, passed quietly from one generation to the next, was perhaps the greatest gift they left behind. A reminder that the world often overlooks the quiet, the different, and the gifted, but that those who see them and choose them wisely can create something lasting, beautiful,